Of course, there's a plane going right overhead as I attempt to start this video, which shouldn't take long, because as I'm looking over my notes, yeah, a lot of gibberish, and which somewhat makes sense to me, but it probably won't make sense to you. So if there's anything that I wrote down that called my attention, I'm gonna have some background music here. This is Shuffle from Mood playlist, if anyone's curious. Yeah, so if there's anything that was interesting, I was just going to mention really quick, because usually those things tie together, and I actually already said some of it, so, and notes that I took while I was watching Anderson Cooper, I think, and even if it sounds simple, or just like any other phrase, or you know what it means, like the point is more so that the way that it was said or something about it stood out to me, and maybe it just is something that would stand out to you and be important for another reason or sign, clue. So yeah, some of those words or phrases were corroborating evidence, footnote, because I think yeah, not important story. So but just some of the details below, so maybe make sure to check the details. Maybe there's a song there that applies to you, and I think that it was something they were talking about that reminded me of a lyric from the song Constantine by something corporate from like 2000. And so I'll probably just add that to the list or something. If you haven't heard it, it's just kind of a punk rock song. It's a great story. Yeah, I saw that. Synergy, there people were talking about synergy when I was taking these notes, which is like the synastry charts of overlapping birth charts, to see how you and another person's planets and all that line up. But I actually did it for, you can do it for an event, which is like a date, date and time, so you can compare your birth chart with the planets during that, wherever they were on that day, and get kind of a dynamic of how maybe energies or emotions, things like that, were playing out for you on that day, or will play out for you on that day. What else? Oh yeah, I did mention, but in case you didn't read it, by destruction of that, the stock market playlist. I realized to be really comprehensive, and to do it right, like, I'd have to, do more specifically and for each day and time and stuff like that. And so I don't know if it was helping people. I left it up for a month without changing it, and things seemed to be going pretty well in the stock market. But after that, I was just kind of like worried that I didn't want, I'm not an expert at all on the stock market, so I don't want people to take my advice as expert financial advice by any means. So I just, and I think in 2 or more of the playlists, I warned people that I was going to change it, or that I did change it, so that the lineup's different from what Shuffle had put up, or what Universe had decided would be. And so to probably not go by it unless you took like a screenshot of how it originally was. Long story short, like, yeah, unless I had some sort of actual concrete idea of what I was doing and what kind of advice and to whom I was talking, I don't think that I should be giving any sort of advice that way, although it was going pretty well. So let's see what else. Yeah, and so by destruction, when I said destroying the playlist, that had to do with the stock market. Really just meant rearrange, because that again has to do with the fifth house and construction, building, deconstruction, and in that sense philosophy, Derrida, and deconstructing everything from, an idea, a concept, a visual, a piece of clothing, a pattern, to a playlist order, and maybe showing the significance of placements, of where and how things are structured, knowing that it aligns somewhat with numerology and the tarot, and important numbers that we've talked about. So maybe proving that point a little bit. Yeah, so the fifth house, destruction, construction, recreating something, building something up, creativity, all those kinds of things having to do with the fifth house of your heart, of home, things important to you, community, friends, anything that has your heart, and anything that, really is close to you in some significant way, and the things that you create out of that area of your life, and whether that's small, like a playlist, or an entire collection, art installation, it has something to do with the engineering aspect of design as well, and figuring out how things go together, and especially if you're trying to come up with something that hasn't really been done in a specific way, in a specific sense, like a pattern that has some sort of weird design feature that, isn't expressly laid out in a pattern making book of how exactly to do it. So you kind of have to, either drape or find, figure it out, and do a bunch of test runs and things like that. So, yeah, so that all just then relates back to the fifth house, and also having to do with, entertainment, acting. That just reminded me of my old, this is kind of like a reading, just train of thought reading, by the way. I'm trying to keep it quick. But my old landlord in Brooklyn, who was just like a not a good guy, and he had one company, or I guess one overall company, and a bunch of sub companies under similar but different names, like Brooklyn Entertainment and Brooklyn Theatrics and Brooklyn Corporation or something like that, and he was like Airbnb-ing out some of these places, and half of his buildings he owned all over Brooklyn. It's kind of notorious in that way, and half of his buildings were in foreclosure, and I don't know why I'm going on about this, but maybe it's important. And I had, I was fighting him in court for like a year, and I won my case, and there's multiple ways I could have won the case, but one was easy and it worked out first. And so, but I was ready. I had a huge file folder of every bit of evidence I could find on him, and all the different court documents. I really probably should have been a lawyer. And everything, like highlighted of the people that were actually, I figured out, just his significant other, but she would go by different names and show up in court as his girlfriend, as his landlady, as, in order to collect money for him, I guess. And I had even reached out to like the lawyers that were representing this in I'm like blanking on names because I haven't lived in New York for a while. Carroll Gardens, and on the corner there of the block of that Prime Meats and Frankie's is on. For anyone that lives in New York, it's just like a corner block, and there's like a pub outdoor place, and he owned that and renovated it and all that, but then just stopped paying. I don't know why I'm going on about him. Payments there, and the lawyers that were representing the people that were renting the bottom floor from him, they got back to me right away and like gave me everything just in case it went to court, that they had on him. I mean, he was like notorious for, I'm not trying to gossip, but I feel like there's like lots of connections, parallels to things. He was, of things going on right now, notorious and just all over for all these like kind of corrupt and shady financial dealings and all that, but especially for renting and turning a place in Tribeca into a sex den, like a speakeasy sex den under his the mortgage, I guess, was under his daughter's name, who was like 7. You just, kind of that kind of crappy thing that someone would do, take out mortgage under their kids' names. So I don't know, but yeah, just I don't know. He was not a good lawyer or landlord, and a great lawyer. Anyways, back to my notes. Since things do happen to parallel, when I said I lied about people's clothing, because, I mean, I didn't say I lied about anything else. I don't even remember what I wrote in that long novel of thought train, but I did say that I, lied about the way that they looked. And if you didn't catch it, then this is important. And but only because I think that clothes are, you can just sort of be judgmental in a way, on a level, on clothing, because it's clothing. If you separate from the person, it's subjective in your likes, and really it's pretty insubstantial of a thing to lie about. So anything else that stood out to me? About the playlist, that I took the Russia probe shuffle from, and did a reshuffle from that. That was sort of the combination. There's a lot of ways to look at it, but of energies of the Sun and Saturn, or that area in my chart that I relate it to, which is kind of around Libra, the IC, and for me at least, and that's where that whole interest in politics and law comes through. And I always think of it as like the 4 of Swords, as a representation of like the 4th house, or the IC, or somewhere there where Libra balance, and yeah. And so anyways, that playlist was 4x1, never-ending overlap. Took on a lot of different meanings at different points of, adding songs to that playlist. So just depending on whatever I was going through, I guess, at the time, over the course of like a week or 2 that I was making that playlist, and I guess until now. So it is kind of a representation of what's going on in our lives. So, and I do try to make it sort of general. That's why I, use some of the same songs, and you don't have to think too much about, a certain song comes up from an artist, and they are an artist that I use sort of regularly, or at least 3 or so of the same songs. Hopefully, whatever, regardless of the song that comes up, that I'm taking from a certain playlist that may or may not have every single song I've ever used, hopefully it'll trigger the thought in you to like quickly think to yourself what the other songs are that I've used by that artist, and if those might be significant to events or things of concerning you. But on another level, because I did also divide it between the Dan 40 playlist and 4 Leo playlist. And now that I'm starting to realize people are watching this, it's sort of embarrassing. But to relate it to, I guess, what's going on in politics and different leaders and areas that are of focus or in focus right now, that people are talking about, things going on, and the kind of two different bases that Trump has, and both of those people sort of representing the two different bases or sides of both the Republican Party, but also the country as a whole, and then also expanding outwards, our country versus another country, based on where the people are that I'm sort of integrating into this, where they're from, their background, and things like that. And so, and also, Trump, being a Gemini, is, it's the twins card, or it's the sign of the twins, and so there you go. There's two different aspects of one person. Is one way of looking at it, like triangular composition or something like that. And one side of that would be the very conservative and more so Republican, very maybe far right base that people are always referring to here, versus more the rest of the country. And hold on. Yeah, so both those two playlists being representational of two people representing the two different sides or bases of Trump's presidency, and just basically Republicans, Democrats, ideals, values, and how I guess I would think I'd be relating to them in real time. And then on a larger scale, one Leo would be, because I think his background's Russian, and so I just hope people don't mind that I'm like just involving them. And so when it has to do with other leaders and things like that, he might be representational of Russia or Germany, and whereas the other playlist would be representing America, home base, because I don't really know that person's background. And 4x1 would then just be the combination, I guess, of the two, or sort of composite of both, or things that overlap and apply or could fit into both playlists, or personalities, or places, ideals, political, all that. So, that would be the things that apply to both. And I think it's kind of it then kind of just works out with the whole Saturn and Sun down there by the IC, and fourth house, fifth house, and that sort of tension between a house that's about creativity and a house that's more so about, at least I relate to it as study focus house and home and quiet serenity. I think you can even see that in Legally Blonde when she's like studying for the LSAT, and wants to go partying, and that's how I always felt like, I guess, growing up, staying in and studying. Anyways, it was fun. But anyways, yeah, I guess you could think of like the different houses as walls, dividing spaces, and I guess sort of even thinking about it, going into like ideas about dimensions and things like that, just translating it. But anyways, I'll go back to that. And what else? I was watching The Ascent of Man, and just some phrases stood out to me. Brilliant sequence of cultural peaks, and I thought of Twin Peaks, and for some reason that was important at the time. Maybe it was, I don't know why, but maybe part-time or something. We've been talking about CPA, part-time CPA or an accountant or something like that. And he goes on to say, imagination is a telescope in time. We are looking back at the experience of the past. And so, yeah, I feel like that's a good way to describe having opposite sun-moon placements in the birth chart, as your feelings are always catching up to your self-expression and vice versa. Initial reactions versus how once you've had time to digest something and understand how it makes you feel better, in a better sense, then you, are able to grow, I guess. But that's that detachedness, being able to look at something in a detached sense, taking yourself out of it. The moon kind of does haunt the earth in a way. So I wrote, with detachment mainly, unless there are experiences that are either necessary to or helpful for ultimately to re-experience, perhaps in a totally different context, in order to reconcile and resolve emotionally, so there's only peace when you look back, more and more over time, at that same experience, and the joy and the realization of progress within yourself. And that, I just think, in a huge sense, speaks to like everything that we've talked about, and even just the time ladder theory. I mean, there has to be increments. There has to be a change and noticeable awareness of change from one stage to the next in order to understand or realize that you are changing in an evolving creature and person, mind, and I don't think we notice those things enough. Just within ourselves, maybe to take pride, I guess, in your small, everyday sort of achievements, and noticing of where you've, maybe just friendly reminder, but it's just that whole idea that there has to be something to work towards, hence the journey is the dust, all that kind of cheesy stuff, but there has to be a way to move from point A to point B. There has to be a point B to move to, and then that reminds me of Andy Warhol from A to Z and back again. I could probably, at the time, quote to you like every line from that book that I would read during poli-sci. Anyways, so, what else? Wrote, I think is at like minute 28 in that Ascent of Man video. He's talking about science and art are but equal expressions of the marvelous plasticity of a creator's mind. Oh, and that night on my way home, I had, again, sort of just passed very similar license plate looking, well, license plates that stood out to me, and they were very specific, so I thought I'd mention them in case they're important to anyone. One was March 14th, the next one was Trump, and the next one was ports. Not even kidding, and they're all in like uppercase, like bold black letters, and ports like port of entry, which I realized the Four of Wands also represents. And because at one point I won a cruise and was had to just fly to port in Florida, and for that the World card and the Four of Wands popped out when I was thinking about it. So also I think it was in one of these songs. I think it's either called Egyptian or Egyptian Night Princess. I think that's it. At 2:43 Nevada, and it says Veritas. So there's some, I just write down what keywords to keep up, but like, so I'm sure if I went back this would make more sense. But 17, I think it's number 17 in that playlist then. Truth, Nevada, because it says NVDA. Yeah, so then I have a little picture. I can show this to you. It's not too dark. A little picture of a globe, a crystal ball. If you can see, that's really blurry. But in, like, having a crystal ball sitting on your table, it's just a different way of thinking about dimensions in that sense too, because, say, shrink yourself down, and our entire universe exists in this one little crystal ball globe sphere, and we're wondering about dimensions outside of our known universe. And I mean, it could be just as simple as that. Just, just because something is, I don't know how to explain it. It just makes sense in my head. But even though something might seem like it's outside of our universe, our dimensions as we know them, could very well just be breaking that glass to see that you're in the same dimension in all reality. Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, it's just a thought. And that whole 11:11, that was also another way to say, like, sometimes it's 1-to-1 ratio. These are all different ideas and thoughts and concepts and just tidbits of sparks that, for whatever reason, made me excited and could apply in like 5 or 6 different things that I'm working on, thinking about, and maybe apply to you. So I skip around a lot because I'm just kind of doing multitasking. But when you think of the ratio 1-to-1, but then how each person has, there's 2 sides of everything, as I've been told. And so, yeah, then that would be 11:11. And, what else? A little translation, to say I know, like I know something is such and such. The King of Wands popped out, and I realized you can only see one eye, so it's like I know, and wands being fire represent knowledge and learning and passion and creation and all these kinds of things. So it makes sense. I know. And then and that's, if it's facing you. And another way of looking at cards that are either, facing you or facing outward is facing you is yourself, things that are affecting you personally, your inner world, your own little world, and or your your emotions, your inner self. And any card that comes out facing outward, or to the other person that maybe you're doing a reading for, yeah, that obviously would apply to them. But in general, the outside world and others and things coming in at you, and instead of in to out. So curved archways, rainbows, nice quality. Oh, and another way to say I know is just the Justice card reverse. I know there's so many different meanings to the Justice card, and I just always think of it as law, or like laying down the law, or crossing a line, or sort of truth, and fact-based things. So I gotta finish this up. Okay. Cannonball demon. For some reason I wrote that down. I'm outside on my porch, so don't mind the messy. So maybe I really thought I had more to talk about. Explain. I wrote notes for myself. It's the whole idea of Mona Lisa, like an entire, in a sense, a little bit like just call-outs of the Truman Show, where that part where he's piecing together, trying to remember the face of that girl he met in high school. My idea for the whole, like a whole Mona Lisa screenplay would be carrying through that twin flame soulmate thing where, two people are reincarnating together and having to find each other in each life. And Leonardo da Vinci has a dream, I guess, when he's younger, maybe when those 2 years he goes missing, and of a face of, Mona Lisa. And he spends his whole life looking for her, hoping to find the girl in his dream. And he finds someone pretty close to her. And that's what, but still, like, she, I think, kind of like me in some ways, has that, like, face where you just have all these different angles, you look different all the time. And so maybe that's why he spent so long painting, 16 years painting that. Yeah, and I also had an idea for prolonging life and the effects of that on the justice system, and jail time, court rulings, if all of a sudden lifetimes were doubled, and what would the consequences then be for sentencing, and those already in prison, and would it affect people's choices in life, go back to school? I think a whole long thing gets really actually involved, really profound thinking about how we really base our lives around our understanding of how much time we have, and the jail system, and as a way to bring into one central place where that idea of doubling one's lifetime and all of a sudden having all this time to so much more time to and how that would affect in these kind of closed quarters, and I go into a lot of detail about it, but yeah, I kind of wanted to take note of that. And if there's anything else, because I'm always, I also wanted to say, does a thought or an idea take up space? And I'd say yes, because when your mind is overwhelmed, your mind blanks, you have too many things going on in your head, things start to overlap, get confusing, signals crossing, fifth house again. But I thought that was just sort of interesting because everything, just a clue or just an idea comes from an idea. Everything beginning with an idea, and how the layering of ideas over time and how they build on to each other and expand from each other like branches, neurology of the brain, all that, but like how, yeah, I guess if one idea, and just how to explain, but like, I guess that, yes, I would say that an idea does take up space and in some sort of hypothetical sense, but maybe it really actually does because you feel the effect of it in your ability to think, and how well you're able to think, and how able you're able to get your words across. Example right now. But yeah, you have too many things going on in your head, kind of like the 10 of Wands, too many ideas or something like that. And it does, yeah, have an effect on you. So if you think of an idea as matter, I guess ideas do then take up space, or vice versa. Maybe I'm saying it the wrong way. But I just like these, you don't have to be necessarily right. If you really care enough to know the answer to these things, and you could probably look it up or go research it for the rest of your life if that's what you really want to do. But like, yeah, again, these are all like starting points just to get people thinking about it, and thinking about something in a new way or a different context, or how something you're familiar with would apply, would react, work in a different setting, context, field, and what would that exact, is to the best of your knowledge or prediction abilities, how would that reaction take place in a different context. And I'm talking really fast, my phone is about to die, and I'm trying to get this all in because I also don't think I have a lot of space on my phone. And did I finish my thought? I don't even know. Oh, and I also thought it was interesting, I forgot to mention this, the Ascent of Man video, a bunch of playlists. I didn't ever see this before, but it was made by Maximilian, which I had mentioned in one video somewhere. That was a name, family name, Maximilian. I guess it was my great uncle Max. So, somehow everyone's names, even down to Doris, my grandma. It's like on the bus of Almost Famous, and a bunch of different Doris Troy that keeps coming up, and just pretty much every name in my family or people I've known. It's just in everything that I come across, and it's so bizarre. I'm like, does everyone I know have really common names or what? But no, it's just how it is, I guess. These are just so many things to talk about. Someone mentioned, I think, in also September 7th, lesson 52 to 58, about the project chapter, Virginia, Georgia, 13 colonies. I don't know what this was all pertaining to. Those are words that stood out to me. But September 7th, especially because, well, that's my dad's birthday, and also happens to be Trump, or not Trump. See, I kind of mixed them up. But Putin's birthday, September 7th. So I feel like I have a good understanding of that sort of someone born on that, if you believe in astrology, personality trait, at least the way that they come across. As a Libra, and what that kind of person's like, so it's good for anticipating things. Oh yeah, and maybe the bottom line of all of this is that the universe is just God's imagination. So I think that has to do with one of the videos that'll probably make a lot more sense when you watch that video, and all of a sudden this will pop to your mind, and you'll be like, oh, that takes on new meaning. And that's the whole point, because otherwise it would just be a repeating pattern of dots and binary code. So it's all about the meaning and what goes into one dot, which actually I'm trying to figure out how to set up like some sort of form or something, because I would love for people to participate and put in their, without having to give me their birth time and information. You can just do it yourself and get your midpoint, your astrology sun moon midpoint. And I would love to like input that from a huge variety and selection of whoever were to give that information to me, and put it into one of these data systems and see how different midpoints and all the, just, you don't know what it looks like until you do it, you know. And so and that's what it's kind of like draping in that sense too. It's the only way to come up with something sort of original, at least, even though we're all just a reflection of, you know, if you believe in all. Anyways, so is to do something that you don't necessarily have an end goal or end game of how it should look or what it should be, but to just, my teacher would always say, my relaxed draping teacher, there's structured draping, very like precise, and you know, for structured jackets, that kind of thing, how to make those and detailed instructions. And then there's more like soft draping, where you just kind of like play. Obviously, I think anyone could, I like the last, the former. And so my teacher would, and some people would not be able to do this. In the soft draping, they needed to be able to know where their starting point was. It was more of a, just instructions and structure and that kind of thing, and would just be completely lost. Okay, what do I do? And for some reason, I guess it works well for me. But what he would say for others is that just take 3 pins and just blindly put them, attach them to the fabric, and then kind of blindly put them onto the dress form, and let that be your starting point, whatever you have to work with, and then just drape and come up with new shapes and new ways to wrap the fabric around the body, and new looks and silhouettes and all that. And that possibility is what is refreshing to me, and that when there's possibility and when there's something tangible that you can actually do to reach that possibility, that's when there's like hope, and that's when I feel inspired, because I like kind of know I can do this. But even with that, some people just couldn't do it. But I think it's interesting that he'd say like 3 pins, just take 3 pins, and that kind of just reminds me of like a grand air trine. 3 pins, and also fixed points, which kind of relate to that graphic of a video I made and put up like I think yesterday, that shows a portion of my journal notes, and maybe fixed points or critical degrees have something to do with those points I'm talking about. And you know, those things might already be like well thought out and developed and understood by someone who studied science, but I think it's definitely more interesting, if not I don't know, to try to come to your own conclusions. And it's funny looking back how often that happened, and I would obviously probably like lesser terminology, but and a little bit more broadly of an understanding, but come to the same conclusions as all these theories and physics and all these things by just doing what Leonardo da Vinci did, and just going out and looking at the world around you and asking questions and wondering and just coming up with ridiculous ideas to work out and play around with, and see then how those connections apply to something perhaps more pertinent or related to you, but also maybe just come up with something brand new just in doing that. So when there is possibility, there is reason and motivation for doing something. So I love this video from St. Laurent. Name of my first boyfriend, 7th grade, Laurent. He was French and Italian. Maybe Canada's important because he went to school. He went to McGill. So maybe Canada's important, and that's a takeaway for you. And if that is a sign or makes sense to you, or calls your attention to something, it's all about what calls your attention, and then taking those call-outs as mental takeaway notes, and then realizing them in your own life context, understanding. Come to your own understanding, I think it is. Maybe not your own conclusion, because things can always be proven wrong, and we don't know everything, and we only know what we know when we know it, as so many people say. And so it's more so come to your own solution, or come to your own understanding, and then compare and contrast, or to even heighten or further that understanding, compare and contrast, mix together facts or what else you know or can find about that specific subject or topic or idea, and then see what you come up with. And I feel like that's sort of the essence of that 4x1. You know, there's a little bit of destruction, there's a little bit of hurt, there's a little bit of, you know, just everyday sort of ups and downs and things that really probably come across as way more dramatic, you know, especially I've noticed my writing comes across way more dramatic than, you know, I mean for them too. But anyways, I hope that you'll get a chance to watch those videos and check out the recent playlists, and in that way be able to compare timelines, and just if I took a playlist down or made it private doesn't mean that, and it had something to do with you, doesn't mean I'm like cutting, you know, you off, or like, you know, some sort of form of, it's not any magic or anything like that. It's not like a slap in the face or anything. It's just sometimes, you know, eventually a playlist has to come to a close, so I can move on to a new thought and not be overwhelmed with too much going on in my head. So maybe it's just getting things down on paper, and composition book. Sometimes I just like the way things sound, and it makes me like wonder why, and then I decide to do like some sort of witty take on a composition line notebook and create a line. I don't know, I'm just going on totally tangents now, but anyways, yeah, so maybe that cleared some things up for you. Maybe you're more confused. Maybe you weren't listening and just sort of zoning out. And anyways, but thanks for listening. And I hope in that some way, just me thinking about these things and jotting them down and sharing my thoughts with you, gets you thinking about little things in your life and how to appreciate them more, embrace them more, or just take note of them more, and see where those little signs and clues and things that say hi to you, where they lead you, where they take you. Maybe try to take a different way home today from work, or go on a little adventure, or, you know, look for something exciting. So, alright, have a great end of the day. Bye.